Well, our next guest we're putting in the spotlight will be a familiar face to many Canadians. Marc Garneau became the first Canadian to travel to space in 1984. And after seeing success as the president of the Canadian Space Agency, Marc Garneau entered politics in 2006, where he served as Minister of Transport and then Foreign Affairs in the Trudeau government. His achievements in space exploration and politics are chronicled in his new memoir, A Most Extraordinary Ride: Space, Politics, and the Pursuit of a Canadian Dream. Marc joins us now from Montreal. Mr. Garneau, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure, Travis.
We're going to talk a little politics, we're going to talk a little space, but we're going to start on the political side because that's what a lot of folks are talking about these days. Canada is set to have another election next fall, if not sometime before then. At a time when the Liberals are far behind in the polls, you've said that after 9 years in government, any party would see some fatigue amongst voters. Do you think that there is any way for the Liberals to right the ship before the next election?
Well, they still have some time to do it. We'll see if they can refresh themselves and present a vision to Canadians that will be compelling. It's challenging when you're down in the polls, and you've been down for quite a while, and it happens, as you say, to pretty much every party that's been in power for that long, but we'll see what happens. Okay,
you say a refreshed vision. Do you think a drastic overhaul of their political strategy is needed to save them before the next election?
Well, if I was sort of strategizing on this, I would, first of all, zero in on what is really of concern to Canadians. And at the moment, what it seems to be is the cost of living, housing, those kinds of issues. And I would basically try to address those to provide some reassurance to Canadians that measures are being put in place to address those concerns.
The Prime Minister seems to be trying to do that. However, the opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, seems to be having more success with that messaging. What do you think it is about the Conservative strategy that seems to be penetrating when the Liberal messaging is not?
Let's be clear. What the Conservative leader is doing is attacking what he doesn't like about the Liberal Party's positions. And it is very easy to criticize, and he will get a lot of support from people saying, yeah, we're having problems with the cost of living, those kinds of things. It's hard to find affordable housing. So it's very easy if you're a politician to criticize. What needs to happen now is for people to understand what Mr. Poilievre will put in the window instead, and he hasn't done that yet.
Do you think that this is going to be an election about the Prime Minister, and whether or not Canadians want another Justin Trudeau term, or do you think it will be about Pierre Poilievre's messaging?
You can never separate them completely. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, came to power in 2015, a resounding victory, a majority. And, over the period of 9 years, Canadians have gotten to know him. And sometimes the shine wears off. That happens with every single Prime Minister. Nobody can keep that shine going all the time. So in some cases, it may have to do with the Prime Minister. But I think that for most Canadians, the real concerns are the issues themselves. And so I think it's going to be more a fight about who can present the best approach to resolving the issues of concerns to Canadians.
Well, let's talk about the global stage and foreign affairs, because in this book you say that Canada's standing in the world has slipped. In what ways specifically do you think that our country's perception has been diminished around the globe?
I would say two things. One, and I'm not the first to say it, we've allowed our armed forces to the amount of resources that we put into our armed forces to diminish. So we're less capable of making a contribution to global collective security. So that's one thing. We need to increase the funding for our armed forces, for example, to reach that 2% of the NATO target. That's one thing. The other thing is, I think, and I'm very, very encouraged by the fact that the Prime Minister is just coming back from the ASEAN countries. I've said it for a long time that the Indo-Pacific is essentially where the center of gravity of global geopolitics has migrated. Countries like India and China and the ASEAN countries and Japan and Korea. And I think that we are playing catch up to some extent. But as I say, I'm very encouraged by the fact that the Prime Minister is just coming back from Laos and has said that we're going to open some embassies there. I think we really need to pay attention to that part of the world. We've been very, very good at dealing with our neighbor to the south in terms of foreign relations and with European countries, but we need to play catch up in across the Pacific in that part of the world.
And as we know, he's been trying to do that with this visit to the summit. I want to ask you about what's going to be happening in the States in less than a month, which is the U.S. election, and how that could change Canada's relationship with the United States, depending on who the winner is.
Yeah, I mean, I will make no secret of the fact that I'm hoping that Kamala Harris is going to win, because I think then relations will be pretty similar to how it was with President Joe Biden. I have serious concerns if Donald Trump wins, because listening to him, and I have been listening for a while, there's some very worrisome protectionist rhetoric coming out of his mouth, and I think that given the sheer amount of trading that we do with our partner to the south, I think that could present difficulties.
We are back with part 2 of our Spotlight interview with Marc Garneau. 40 years ago this month, Marc became the first Canadian to travel to outer space. He explores this and much more in his new memoir, A Most Extraordinary Ride, Space, Politics, and the Pursuit of a Canadian Dream. Marc Garneau joins us once again to discuss this part of the book. So, Marc, you write in the book that the feeling that you get when looking down at Earth from outer space is difficult to describe, but I'm going to ask you the tough question. How best would you describe it?
I think it's an experience that changes the way you look at planet Earth. Most of us, I mean, we all live on Earth, and we see about 5 or 10 kilometers around us. And our world, in a way, is that small circle that moves around with us during the day. And I'm not saying we don't think about global issues, but we're mostly focused on local issues and day-to-day things. When you go up in space and you're orbiting around the Earth, and it only takes 90 minutes to orbit the Earth, you see all of the countries of the Earth, and you see the planet silhouetted against the blackness of space. And it makes you very conscious of the fact that this is the cradle of humanity. This is where it all started. And there are 8 billion of us down on the surface of that planet. And it's our only home. There's no option B. And we need to take care of it. That strikes you when you look down and you see that very thin layer called the atmosphere that, of course, contains the air that we breathe. And you realize we need to take care of it. It belongs to the whole planet. There's no Canadian atmosphere, no Chinese atmosphere. It's common. The same with the oceans. You see the effects of human activity down on the planet. Large clouds of smog. That's sort of yellowish air that you can visibly see over California, over China, over the Mediterranean. And that, of course, is evidence that we're polluting that atmosphere. You see forest fires burning. When I first flew in 1984, there was 1 million square kilometers of smoke over the rainforest in the Amazon because they were clearing forests for agricultural purposes. And I think you get my meaning that we are sometimes well-intentioned, but we are sometimes damaging our planet. You're also aware of the fact that there are dozens of conflicts at any one time going down on the surface of the Earth. So what I'm trying to say is that you shift your perspective to the bigger issues.
So I think that you're getting at the question I have next, which is in this book you talk a bit about the public questioning why we need space travel right now when we are dealing with so many issues here, when we're dealing with 2 wars, cost of living crisis, climate change. We just talked about politics. What is the case for funding space travel, and is the case still as strong as it was 40 years ago?
The vast majority of money that is spent going to space is spent on building satellites that actually make our life much better down here on Earth. I often talk to young people and I show my cell phone and I say, did you ever wonder why you could call anybody on the surface of the planet with this device? Did you ever wonder why you can be anywhere on the planet and it can tell you exactly where you are on the surface? Do you ever wonder how we find out about hurricanes coming across the Atlantic and threatening North America? That's because of weather satellites. So all of that infrastructure of satellites and spacecraft that are above our heads is actually helping us down here on Earth, and it's money well invested. Now, the human exploration, which is where you bring in humans, is also important because I think it inspires young people. I mean, I've spoken for 40 years to young people, and I can see how their eyes light up when an astronaut explains what they're doing up in space. I think it makes them dream. I think it makes them want to sort of reach their own stars, and I think that's very important.
I was asking Jeremy Hansen about this as well, and for decades, the space game was one that involved governments only. Now it involves private companies. You talk about Elon Musk, SpaceX, and others. I wonder what you think of that and what the role for commercial businesses should be, and whether or not that is something where the line is being crossed at this point, or do you think things are great right now, working well with government and also these private companies?
I think it's a good thing. As Jeremy told you, at one time it was only governments that spent money because the private sector saw no business case, didn't want to take the risks. Space is complex, it's technical, it's expensive. But now we've got the private sector getting involved in space, and they're developing technologies, and I think they're helping to provide even more capabilities. If you look at Elon Musk's Starlink system, for example, if you look at the SpaceX rockets, those are just examples, and there are quite a few more of where the private sector now is actually willing to invest in space. And I think generally that's a positive thing, providing it remains regulated and it doesn't become the Wild West up there.
So last question to you. You've done politics now, you've done space, you do a memoir, which is a bit of a retrospective. What is the next chapter? What is the next book for Marc Garneau?
Well, I haven't thought of the next book, but what I'm going to do with my life now is enjoy retirement because after 58 years of being in a profession, if you want to put it that way, I really want to concentrate on my family, and I'm really enjoying it, and I'm working on my cooking skills. There you go. Good plan. Marc Garneau, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. Marc Garneau was the first Canadian in space and former Liberal Transport and Minister of Foreign Affairs. His new memoir, A Most Extraordinary Ride, Space, Politics, and the Pursuit of a Canadian Dream, is out now.